This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern. Every week we bring you conversations with authors about the books and research and other things that we like. And if you like us, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter by going to our homepage, that's tlv1.fm/Tel Aviv Review. Scroll down to the bottom and click the big red button that says Patreon. Click and support us. Some of you have been doing this for months and years, and we cannot thank you enough. This episode was supposed to be part of a series in partnership with the Israel office of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation that we like to call Israel Behind the Headlines. But the 7th of October events changed our plans, like everybody else's, and this episode is one of a few that will be dedicated to assessing and reassessing our situation here in Israel in light of the events. To help me with this momentous task is my guest today, Dr. Michael Milstein, the head of the Palestinian Studies Forum at Tel Aviv University's Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies. Dr. Milstein is also a colonel in the IDF Reserves, having served as an intelligence officer, most prominently head of the Palestinian Department in the IDF Intelligence. Dr. Michael Milstein, hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello, Gilad. Thank you for having me.
So many people were surprised by the Hamas offensive on the 7th of October, by its scale, the audacity, Hamas's operational abilities. Were you surprised too, as someone who has studied the Palestinians for so long?
Well, I must be frank enough, Gilad, and say that I'm quite known here in Israel for the last two and a half years as a troublemaker. I give a lot of interviews and I write a lot of articles about what I call the wrong policy of Israel toward Gaza during the last 2 years. And during the last 2 years, I try to emphasize a lot of negative points regarding our policy in Gaza, mainly the effort to promote all kind of economic and civil efforts in order, as a lot of people in Israel assumed, to improve the situation in Gaza and therefore to reduce the likelihood of escalation. And for 2 years I wrote a lot about this wrong assumption, because my main arguments was, first of all, you should know Hamas better. You should really know or recognize the basic ideological DNA of Hamas. Hamas is not a ruling party that is getting more and more moderate because of its control over 2.2 million population. Hamas is an organization, a radical ideological one, which is ready to risk every kind of economic interest regarding the population for its main target, the jihad against Israel. And the second was that you cannot really, buy the people of Gaza, and of course not Hamas, by all kind of economic temptations. 20,000 workers that Israel permitted them to get out of Gaza and to work in Israel, and all kind of other steps like salaries and money from Qatar that got into Gaza, improving the export in the import. And even though I was not surprised by the effect that Hamas promoted an offensive against Israel and was not committed to any kind of understandings or agreements, I was surprised by the amount, by the size of this offensive. If you could tell me on the morning of October the 7th that 20, 30, 50 Hamas terrorists got out of Gaza, attacked one of IDF bases, and even tried or kidnapped a soldier, 10 soldiers, it could sound very reasonable, likely for me. But what we are speaking about, 3,000 terrorists in a broad offensive, the broadest ever from Gaza, in one point, in one hour. And of course, if we also speaking about the rate of brutality, the rate of violence, of really a savage violence that appeared in this morning, This surprised me. And although for 2 years I emphasize that the violation of any understanding with Hamas is reasonable, I was not ready for such an offensive.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it goes way beyond the last 2 years. I mean,
Sure.
the question is whether really Israel made a mistake. Israel and the broader region, maybe the international community, made a mistake by allowing Hamas to consolidate its rule, to consolidate itself, both militarily, financially, etc., to be able to carry out this sort of operation in the first place.
Sure. My main argument during it's not only 2 years, during the last decade, is that we are, the Israeli government, by the way, all Israeli governments, the current and the former one, are very soft with Hamas. There was so much, let's call it red alerts or violations of Hamas during the last decade, and Israel actually did nothing. Hamas promoted the brutal terror from Gaza toward the West Bank and Jerusalem and the Arab sector here in Israel. Hamas permitted the Islamic Jihad to have a very, very problematic rounds of escalation with Israel. And Israel actually described the neutrality, let's call it like that, of Hamas in all those rounds of escalations as a positive attitude. They are sitting on the fence, so it seems or it shows that they are deterred. And we actually were so wrong in our policy. But, Gilad, there is one big reservation I must elaborate. We are speaking about, or in the Israeli discourse, we speak about the great failure of letting Hamas to grow and to become such a horrible monster. But we must be frank and must be very accurate. Hamas grew. And Hamas became this monster not only because Israeli policy, but also because of deep developments among the Palestinian arena. Hamas is not an alien. Hamas is a natural part of the Palestinian society, of the Palestinian history, of the Palestinian culture. Hamas is not only a result of the stupidity of Israeli leaders or the Israeli efforts to make the PLO or the PA weaker. Hamas is its roots. You can find them in the deepest intellectual, cultural, and social layers of the Palestinian arena.
Yeah, so this actually prompts two questions, one looking back and one looking forward. The one looking back says, okay, so what could Israel have done not to arrive at this point? As you say, Hamas is part of the Palestinian society and therefore enjoys great popular support. Then it is what it is. And looking forward, the professed goal of this military campaign right now by Israel is to eradicate Hamas.
That's right.
Now, is it really a realistic goal? Bearing in mind everything you've just said, let's talk about looking backwards and then go to looking forward.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So when we're looking backward, I think that there were two basic mistakes, Gilad. First of all, that we were not tough and not strict enough with Hamas. I think that after any kind of violation of Hamas during the last years, mainly in the last 2 years, where the economic settlement was promoted, Israel did
the economic settlement means giving them some sort
giving them permits for workers, improving the life in Gaza. There was a very naive assumption that if there will be an improvement in the economic situation in Gaza, so first of all, Hamas will be deterred, and second, that the population in Gaza themselves, if there will be any escalation, they will promote a protest against Hamas, and nothing happened. Of course, we understood on the morning of October the 7th that we didn't understand them at all. And when we're speaking about mistakes, so the first one is that Israel should promote much tougher response against Hamas. I think that, for example, Israel should ban or stop or halt any the whole project of the workers. I think that at least a year ago, Israel should do it, and she did nothing,
or at least not rely on it to alleviate the situation.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, you can let workers in, but that wouldn't be a game changer.
Of course, and this was quite naive, or let's call it a total or very deep misunderstanding. And by the way, we today understand that several, even, I think that dozens of those workers were Hamas agents. They did not come here to earn money in order to bring bread to the families. They came here in order to collect information that Hamas used when it promoted the offensive. And, the second mistake of Israel regards not to the Hamas, but to the PA. We had a very twisted assumption that the PA, not all of us, but several figures in the government, mainly the heads of the religious Zionism, they got the assumption that the PA is maybe even a worse enemy from Israeli point of view than Hamas. So maybe we should eradicate the PA from the map and not Hamas, and maybe we should be more soft with Hamas because Hamas is the enemy of the PA. And I do understand today, or the Israelis understand today, two basic conclusions, Gilad. First of all, you cannot run away from the Palestinian issue. Netanyahu spoke for about a year that he found the formula how to promote normalization with the whole world, Arab world, with Saudi Arabia, without dealing with the Palestinian
more
issue.
More than a year. It's been one of his flagship
for about
policies.
5 years,
Even
since
more.
the Abrams Accords began. He found the formula. And we understand today it was not only an illusion. This was a horrible pattern of
misconception. Yeah,
absolutely. Full of illusions and a very, very, very negative one. And we do understand that when you're comparing the PA is not an ally of Israel. It is not our best friends. First of all, they are better than Hamas. And they are a partner, a very problematic one, but they are a partner. And we should realize that. Mm-hmm. So regarding the second question about
looking forward.
Yeah, looking forward and trying to analyze what is this general term, erasing Hamas or, eradicating Hamas from the map. So, for sure, we need to be much more accurate. You cannot really erase Hamas. First of all, Hamas is an idea. It exists in minds, not only in the streets. And even if you will kill thousands and dozens of thousands of Hamas members in Gaza, and I think that, this is the things that Israel is focused in, the idea itself will exist. And second, Hamas exists not only in Gaza Strip, but also in the West Bank and in other places in the Arab world, like Lebanon and Syria and Turkey and Qatar. So even if you will really cause a severe damage to Hamas in Gaza, you cannot speak about vanishing it at all. And much more important, and this is the lesson that we should learn from the American experience in Iraq in 2003, we shouldn't speak about changing the minds of people. The Americans came with a very, even a naive vision about changing the minds and the hearts of the Arabs. And we do understand today that we should be very modest. You can really cause a severe damage to Hamas. You need to cause a severe damage to Hamas. Don't speak about changing the basic consciousness of people.
No, it's not just basic consciousness, but, I would say internal political dynamics. Because, of course, Hamas will never disappear the same way that other hateful ideologies will never disappear from anywhere else. I mean, in Nazism was still a very marginal thing, but still existed in post-war Germany.
But in much more limited manner, And this is, by the way, the difference between Germany after 45 to the Arab world, to Iraq in 2003, and to the Palestinians today. People like the German people, they were really frank enough to look at the past, to understand that they were totally wrong, and to ask for forgiveness from all the peoples that they committed the war crimes against them. In the Middle East, in the Arab world, actually in the whole Muslim world, the situation is different. The whole concept, the whole term of self-criticism is not very popular.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it's. I would say that Germany is actually an exception to the rule. It's not just. I think it's a very human trait not to admit your own failures. But
relatively, because once again in Argentina after the Falkland War in 1982, there was a self-criticism. In Serbia after the Kosovo War, there was a self-criticism.
Wouldn't you say that?
World, it's much more rare.
What do you think? I'm sorry, I'm going in a tangent here, but I'm interested to hear your view. What was it like among the Palestinians in the 1990s? It seemed like there was this process of coming to terms with the past, with the violent struggle, etc., and opening a new leaf. Do you think it was just lip service, or was it genuine?
No, it wasn't even a very slight discourse about the past. There was no tough discourse about the past. Never. When the Palestinians for example today speak or describe 48, the Nakba, we are speaking about a very monolithic narrative about the past. Their role is always to be victims, and they are very just, of course. And the role of Israel is always to be the bad oppressive power. And in Israel for about 30 or 40 years, there is a very complicated discourse among historians and among politicians about the Nakba. We do know that we were also responsible for this historic trauma. But, of course, the Palestinians that started the war, they also have a role. And unfortunately, till today, and we must be frank enough, again, the Israelis and mainly the Palestinians, to admit that no, there is no really complicated discourse among the Palestinians.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, let's go back to talking about Hamas and the future.
Sure.
So it's really about internal political dynamics and how to marginalize Hamas within Palestinian public opinion so that it wouldn't be as powerful as it is today, and let alone, of course, dismantling its operational abilities. This is something that the army can do and probably is doing as we speak. But really about the survival of Hamas as an idea, as a political agenda, etc. Can it be marginalized to the extent that it won't get in the way the same way that it did until now?
Yeah, but once again, Gilad, I think that we should be very realistic. I think that we can undermine the regime of Hamas. Of course, we can remove Hamas from the current position of a ruling party, and we should do it, of course. We can cause a very severe damage to its political, military, and even social levels. I mean, not only to kill thousands of military wing terrorists, but also to cause a severe damage to the Dawah. Dawah is the civil field, the civil sphere of Hamas. We're speaking about mosques and charity funds and all kind of banks and even hospitals. And we should, I think, stop the activities of all those institutions. But once again, the question of really changing or minimalizing or promoting minimalization of the impact of the ideological impact of Hamas, I'm quite realistic at this point. I do think that if we really want to see any such a change, it will come only from the inside, from the Palestinian discourse. discourse, from the Palestinian efforts to change the textbooks in schools, the textbooks in the university, the language of the media, the mosques, the religious institution. Those are the places where consciousness is being created. And if you will not change the activities or the basic DNA of those places, I think that maybe you can, once again, cause a very severe damage to radical organizations but Hamas, but you will never change the basic attitudes among the Palestinians.
How do you suggest that we change it? I don't mean Israel necessarily, but what can be done to change it?
It's a question that you should ask Palestinians. It's not an Israeli. Israel doesn't have the solutions or the tools for such a thing. It is only a matter of maybe a new generation among the Palestinians. Maybe, I'm not sure. The Z-Gen will have other ideas. He will be much more liberal and much more open-minded. I'm not sure,
but I'm wondering about the effect of the 7th of October attack. Yeah. It was obviously, as you said in the beginning of this conversation, a suicide mission on the part of Hamas leadership. They don't care much because they don't care about thousands of Palestinians dying. But it was pretty clear that there would be an enormous backlash that would undermine and perhaps eradicate their own rule in Gaza. But I'm talking about the average Gazan on the street. I mean, not someone who's ideologically a fervent Hamas supporter, but someone who just happens to live in Gaza. They have sympathies for Hamas, maybe, going to mosque every Friday and having learned those textbooks, etc. I mean, they're not alien or hostile to Hamas, but not necessarily fervent supporters. And they're looking at this operation, a suicide mission, as it were, and aren't they asking themselves? I mean, do you hear that there is some sort of backlash, saying we went too far? This was a suicide mission that we are now paying for.
The answer, Gilad, unfortunately, is very, very short and sad. No, I don't recognize anything like that. Even more than a month after this war began, of course, with a horrible massacre and war crimes of Hamas. There is zero criticism and zero other voices among the Palestinians against Hamas. I'm not speaking about criticism about the moral issue. How can you promote such a horrible war crimes against babies and women and civilians, innocent one? I have zero expectations at this point. But I'm speaking about blaming Hamas for this disaster.
Yeah, pragmatic view.
Yeah, you hear nothing, and I'll be even more dramatic, Gilad. When you check the events of the morning of October the 7th, you can see that thousands, not one or two, thousands of civilians, not Hamas members, civilians were involved in looting, stealing corpse, killing, raping. In Israel, we always and I think that it's correct, trying to do this separation between the population and Hamas. This time it's much tougher because the Palestinians themselves, the civilians, were involved in war crimes. And even Saleh Aruri, number 2 in Hamas leadership, in an interview 2 weeks ago, he said, El-Qassam, the military wing, was not involved in any massacre in Israeli citizens. It was only a result of the activities of the citizens. So this is his own words, and I do assess, Gilad, that in Gaza, a month after the war began, most of the citizens, deeply in their heart, they are very much affiliated with Hamas and with the offensive. Of course, they are suffering, and of course, I don't want that any innocent people will suffer. But let's face it, it's not only a conflict between Israel and the very limited terror organization of Hamas. it's a conflict between two peoples and two communities which have a total different way of thinking, moral, ethics, and we should be frank enough to admit it.
Do you think that there's also a sea change in the way Palestinians perceive Israeli military might now that it was a sizable military force coming into Israel and carrying it out, but obviously there's no parity between Israel's might and the Palestinians' might, even Hamas. And now that Israel was caught humiliated in this way, do you think that there might be it might instigate them or motivate them to press on with similar activities?
Unfortunately, yes, Gilad. Of course, the broad population is suffering a lot, but you cannot speak about less motivation among or less enthusiasm among Hamas members. They are full of motivation after this what they call heroic offensive, mythic offensive of October the 7th. And I do think that even if there will be a ceasefire in the coming days, even because of any negotiations about the hostages, so it's quite obvious that Hamas will try to find the closest timing to return to fight. From its point of view, till now, of course, they suffered a lot of damage and a lot of casualties, but we are speaking about ongoing jihad from their point of view, and I don't think that they will give up. There are almost zero people who gave up and became prisoners during now. I mean, Hamas members. So it reflects to you how deep is the willingness, the basic one of Hamas to continue on fighting against Israel. And once again, unfortunately, there is no other voice in among the Palestinian public which says no, stop. It's really wrong. And we blame Hamas in the whole in this whole tragedy.
Mm-hmm. So, what good will cooperating with the PA do?
So, right now it's very problematic because Netanyahu announced two days ago that he, in the future, in the day after, Hamas will be removed from from its current position. He doesn't want, of course, to see any other kind of Hamas regime, but he doesn't want to see the PA in Gaza. And the question is, okay, so what is your alternative? We cannot speak about a world full of unicorns, Zionist Palestinian regime or anything like that. Right now we in Israel are facing in front of several bad alternatives, and we should focus, or we should choose the less worst alternative.
Yeah, which is the PA.
Which is the PA, or if we want to be more creative in our minds, Gilad, we can assist the Palestinians to establish a local administration based on local forces like heads of clans and tribes and heads of NGOs and Fatah senior figures that will replace the current Hamas regime and will be in a close connection with the PA. And, I'm full of question marks about such a structure. And, the Americans also created such a structure in Iraq in 2003, and it was not very stable. Yeah. But when I'm comparing this kind of alternative to all the other alternatives, so we must choose the more realistic one.
But can this structure be stable and hold water over time without a broader diplomatic move, maybe towards a two-state solution, or anything that would address the Palestinian question in a real way?
Yeah, excellent question. Of course not. We're speaking about, in my opinion, we can speak about interim government for 1, 2, 3 years that will rehabilitate Gaza. Gaza is right now in total destruction, and it will be more in a more severe situation when this war will end. And I do think that we are speaking only about a civil administration that will take care about civil human services and about public order. And of course, that in the future, the more far future, we must speak about the political settlement of. And here, of course, we must speak about any integration between the West Bank and Gaza. You cannot continue relying on a very unstable, with zero political level government. You should speak about a long-term settlement based also on political layers.
You were part of the military intelligence establishment. How do you explain that all of them were so wrong about the motivations of Hamas on the 7th of October, not to even think that this is an option and, raise sound the alarm bells, even small ones? I mean, was there really this pervasive groupthink among intelligence officers in the army, the way you see it as a former insider?
You described, I think, Gilad, a big part of the answer. Yes, there was this kind of a very negative way of thinking in IDF. By the way, not only in the IDF, but also among the political decision makers. Those who promoted this whole idea of economic settlements were not only IDF, COGAT, the coordination of government activities in the territories, or the Shin Bet, but also Prime Minister, all Prime Ministers, Netanyahu, Lapid, and Bennett. And we are speaking about a joint assumptions, wrong one, that crossed all the levels. But there is also another point that was, according to my opinion, Gilad, was not learned enough from the failure of 1973, of October the 6th, 1973. And this is the lack
the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah. The Yom Kippur War, yeah. And 50 years ago, exactly before the
almost to the day, yeah.
Yeah, almost the same day. And this is the deep, almost horrible lack of understanding of the other. No Arabic. Less and less people, Jewish one in Israel, knows Arabic today. Not speaking or writing or reading, nothing. And less and less knows anything about the Islamic and the Arab culture, the basic codes. And it's quite amazing because in order, for example, to understand Hamas, it is not enough to have, enormous amount of data, of intelligence data from all kind of cyber systems and very advanced technologies. Okay, you have a lot of data, it's okay, but you need also to understand deeply what is the meaning of this data. And without knowing Arabic and listening to interviews or to announcement of Hamas leaders in Arabic and to read what they are writing in their own bulletins and newspapers, you will understand nothing. And I'm focused mainly on this kind of intelligence. It calls OSINT, the open space intelligence. And after I read the whole interviews and the programs and everything, it was so clear to me that Hamas is not speaking about any future settlement with Israel. Hamas doesn't consider the issue of workers or economic steps as a strategic achievement. Hamas is trying to find the timing to promote jihad, and it was all in Arabic. It was clear.
Yeah, and so do you think that previous attempts, they were talking, throughout the last 15 or 20 years, there were all sorts of initiatives saying that Hamas are willing to consider a temporary ceasefire for, 20 years in exchange for a two-state solution. Hudna, in exchange for a two-state solution and all sorts of... do you think that this is also a hot air?
It's amazing. I met for 3 decades, I met a lot of Hamas members, even senior figures, and I speak with them. And for me, it was quite clear. And they are very frank to describe it in this manner. We are ready to coexistence with Israel, the Zionist entity, but it will never, never be a recognition in your right to exist. And we will find the best timing to violate any kind of agreements with you in order to promote offensives against you. And this is their basic ideological formula. And even the founder of Hamas, Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, 40 years ago, he announced the same formula that is being repeated a lot by Hamas figures. So we should be very realistic. This is the kind of political settlement Hamas is ready to accept. It doesn't mean anything about mutual recognition or any kind of more dramatic or more violent offenses against you. It will happen.
Mm-hmm. One last question. You did say that Hamas is a homegrown Palestinian phenomenon, and you describe its downsides, but there's also an advantage here, and that is, people thought about it as the long arm of Iran and other sort of jihadi elements in the Middle East. And now the current war, and I don't want to jinx anything, but so far it seems that a regional war with Iran and other of its proxies, namely Hezbollah, are being deterred from it is a limited, contained, local war between Israel and Gaza.
Mainly.
Yeah, but so do you think that really that this rhetoric of the Hamas-Iran axis was overplayed?
When I'm trying to describe the current war, Gilad, I agree with you. 90% of this war right now is focused in Gaza. But we should also remember that this is not only a clash, this is an escalation in the northern border with Hezbollah. And this kind of escalation could very rapidly spread to much broad war in the northern border. And of course, there is all those activities of the Houthis in Yemen and all other Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria and other places. I do think that Israel, first of all, of course, Israel basic willingness is to be focused on Gaza, not on other fronts. And I do think that we have the tools in order to be focused on Gaza and not with any other front. But I do think that in the day after the war will end, I mean the war in Gaza, we should also consider what is happening in the northern front, because the situation of the people who lives in the kibbutzim and in the cities nearby Gaza is not very different from the northern border with Lebanon. And I think that it is obvious that any future government in Israel, the current or maybe the next government in Israel, will have to promote a very, very deep, long-term solution to to Hezbollah challenge or threat in Lebanon, and mainly the presence of Radwan forces, the elite forces of Hezbollah on the border with Israel. It's like the issue with Hamas. It's an existential challenge, not only a very limited problem.
Do you think that there was also an intelligence deficit when it comes to Hezbollah that is now perhaps being changed?
Regarding to Hezbollah, I think that the situation was better than in Hamas. In Hamas, we spoke about a very broad offensive plan that was committed with zero information. And regarding Hezbollah, the intelligence is better. And right now, Nasrallah, maybe a month ago, he was full of motivation to promote broader attacks against Israel. Right now, I think that he understands that things are very complicated. First of all, he has his own internal arena in Beirut, which promote enormous pressure on him not to be involved in any kind of conflict with Israel. Second, Israel is very ready for any kind of coming conflict. There are several divisions on the border with Lebanon, and you cannot really promote a strategic surprise like the one which was promoted in Gaza.
Yes. All right, Dr. Michael Milstein, the head of the Palestinian Studies Forum at Tel Aviv University's Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gilad. Thank you for having me.
And many thanks to Itai Shelem, the manager of TLV1 Studios, and to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for the generous support. Now we've got a request, because many or most of you listen to us on the Apple Podcasts app, and would like to ask you to write us a review. Also, you can support us by going to our website and subscribing onto our Patreon campaign. Check out our archive. It has probably close to 1,000 interviews by now. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and most important, join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then, from me here in Tel Aviv, goodbye.